Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Bro Science podcast. And we're again here with Martin and now Tim from Guatemala. How you going, Tim?
Good, mate. Good. Yeah. Coming to you from Guatemala, not Guatemalan myself. I should point
Oh,
out.
But you're Australian, right?
Yeah, also Australian. Yeah.
So what are you doing in Guatemala?
I'm here starting and running a freediving school on the most beautiful lake in the world called Lake Atitlan in the
Free
Western
diving, is
Highlands
that
of
is
Guatemala.
that similar to scuba diving?
Uh, uh, Not really. You are diving underwater. I say the biggest distinction is that scuba diving is an external exploration. You're concerned with what's outside of yourself, the fish and the shipwrecks and whatever else is under there. Freediving is inherently an internal exploration. You very
mm,
quickly see how your mind works and that little monkey voice inside and your body, and you get very connected, mind, body, spirit.
I
Um,
I don't understand.
yeah.
Sorry, I have no idea what's free diving. Can you explain a
So
little bit?
freediving is holding your breath and going under the water, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. So no tank involved. You just hold your breath and go down as deep or as long or whatever goal you have in mind. Um, yeah. And the reason it is internally explorative is because I don't know. Have you ever like done a fast? You gone a few days without eating, maybe, or given up
mm.
social media, or I mean, given up anything. No fap, whatever your cup of tea is, right? You take something away, and all of a sudden everything else becomes louder, and you kind of you
Yeah,
understand. Oh wow, these voices, these urges to do something, and then you're fighting against that. I often use a monkey analogy of this just like animalistic part of you. Um, it's definitely getting louder as you don't give it what it wants. And then,
yeah,
Yeah.
all that's great. You want food a lot, you want love, fulfillment, blah, 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 food, water. There's nothing in the world you want more than air. So you take
yeah.
that away, and like very, very quickly, that monkey becomes very loud. Um, it's a
It's
way of
good.
understanding, yeah, how to go through that with that.
Mm.
I love that. Tim Irvin has a concept like he also uses monkeys for some stuff, and he talks about like what was the name? Like the primitive self against the current self. I don't remember correctly the terms, but yeah, he has like this model of the primitive self being this kind of monkey that you call like talking about always wanting sex, always wanting food, always wanting like do whatever gives gives him pleasure first. Uh, so I love that, and I'd like to
Yeah,
know
man.
how did you get into this? How did you find out about this free diving thing?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I often say, like, I think at least my definition of the human condition is stuck between a god and a monkey. You got that monkey who just wants to eat, sleep, shit, fuck. That's all it wants. Eat Cheetos in bed for the rest of your life. And then you got this, like, you're also divinely touched. You want to be vegetarian and help the kids in Africa and, like, do good for your parents and community or whatever the hell. You want to be more than yourself.
Mm.
That's almost godlike. That's almost divine. And you're kind of tackling the two. And then how I got into it was I was actually at a festival in far north Queensland, the northeastern corner of Australia in the rainforest, which Zav and I have travelled around a bit together. And
Yeah.
I met a bloke who was kind of a few years ahead of me down a more adventurous path than the one I was currently treading. But I was very attracted to that way of life, and he happened to be a freediving instructor. So I kind of put my, I don't know, hook on his line, or I don't know what the turn of phrase is, and
Yeah.
just hung out
Yeah.
with him a whole bunch. And, we were freediving together, and kind of the rest is history following that path. It seems to be a discipline, a sport, or whatever you want to call it, that attracts a certain, type of person that is, I guess, more aligned on that wavelength of, being very interested in that battle, that tug between God and monkey, and living quite intentfully.
Mm.
Yeah,
I have some like actual like logistic questions. How much does an
sure.
average a dive last?
An average dive, like the beginners that I'll be taking out, are usually not in the water for much longer than 30 seconds per dive.
Right.
Going down to 10 odd meters. Usually, once you know the techniques and equalization, and everything, once you kind of got it down pat, you're looking at about a meter a second. So if you go down 30 meters, 30 seconds down, 30 seconds up. And then with training, you'll play around with things. You'll go really fast, or usually a lot longer. You're almost never training at your absolute max depth potential. So it obviously varies, but yeah, the way freediving as a sport is most commonly set up, especially in the water, is how deep you can go, and they're not really concerned with how long that takes. And yeah, a meter a second is relatively quick.
Yeah.
Okay. And how deep have you gone? Like the
I've
most?
gone 40 meters. So that's kind of the
40
benchmark you
meters.
have to hit to become an instructor. And
It's
yeah, I've kind of,
ridiculous.
yeah, so far, like right now, I'm not really looking for more depth at this point. I'm focused on the instructing. I'm sure there'll be a chapter shortly, somewhere in the future
Yeah.
where we keep on going deeper. But the world record, to put that in perspective, is 132 meters. And like I'll take people down, and often about half of my students on their half day Discover Freediving course, first session ever, will go down to 10 meters. It does get exponentially more difficult and technical, but yeah, you'd be surprised with your own
Yeah.
potential. Like,
And
have
You
you ever
just
tried?
unlocked a new thing that I want to try.
Right?
it's
Have you
Yeah.
done
awesome,
What?
any,
man.
Xavier?
Yeah. So me and Tim were traveling around the south of France. Um,
Oh, this is the
about
guy who you travel with at the beginning
yeah,
of
yeah,
your
yeah.
stint. Okay.
Introduced him. Yeah, so we were traveling around the south of France, and I was adamant that I couldn't free dive. I was, because I've always had an ear issue, like an equalization problem. And Tim being Tim, he's like, man, that's not true. You can free dive. You can do this. And because of that conviction, I was like, if he thinks I can do it, I'm just going to keep giving it a crack until I can. Let's go. So jumping in the water, and literally after half an hour, fixed, like issue gone. It just turns out I wasn't equalizing correctly, and that there is a lot of fine systems going on there. So I'd understand how I thought that I couldn't do it, but I also understand how there is the potential to do it and keep growing. So yeah, anyways, and then we're free diving around the south of France, and my mindset was quickly kind of what you're saying before, like how deep can I go? How far can I push it? I mean, it wasn't really that deep. It was maximum 7 meters,
Like
so
what?
we really
Yeah,
pretty
7 meters.
quickly. But like, I really liked that there was a 7 meter barrier, because then I was never concerned of how much further I could go. I just got there. And then when you got there, you could really enjoy the feeling of being like surrounded by a wall of water, and like being in this unfamiliar environment, and being like kind of accepting it and like understanding it, and just sitting down there it's awesome, you know. So I'm so glad. I'm actually really glad that there was the stop to how deep, and instead of thinking that achievement mentality, it was the this is beautiful. I'm so glad I can even experience this. Yeah, so thanks, Tim.
No, most welcome. Yeah, that was before I'd really started actually like teaching people. You're probably my first student technically. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
definitely.
like I mean now what fucking over 150 later. Um, People come with equalization things like they've done scuba diving but like really struggle and can hardly get down, had surgeries and just and that is a genuine physical, like, yeah, as you say, complicated system, and there's limits. But if you can fly on a plane and like your ears aren't bleeding, you can probably equalize and free dive. It's just
Yeah,
going to be a technical thing, like unless you have scar tissue that's fully closing a part, like a pipe, and that would just like severely restrict your ability to go to altitude or get in a plane. There's a way to do it.
Right,
That's
right.
always
So do
quite
you ask
nice.
people that question? Like, of course, like,
I mean,
hey, do you have a
people
question?
will ask
What can
me.
you read?
Yeah, no, people will
Right.
ask me, like, obviously there's a form, there's a liability and medical form questionnaire. But otherwise people will be
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to do it because I don't think I can equalize, and I can tell them that. And yeah, I mean, one comes to mind where he like had like 2 or 3 ear surgeries. It was pretty like, on the fence, but he really wanted to give it a go. And I was like, look, the good thing about freediving is that you unlike scuba, for instance, where you just stick on a tank and I can just keep on going. There's nothing actually stopping me. Just
Mm.
you know, going down to the bottom and never coming back. But freediving, you
Yeah.
have to equalize. You have to be relaxed. If you can equalize on the surface or like 2 meters down,
What
you
does
can
equalize mean?
equalize.
Sorry.
So equalize is you know how you have air in your head, in your mouth, and your nose, and your out to your ears and sinuses, and the water
Right.
pressure compresses all gases, right? So the gases, the air is getting compressed, and you feel that uncomfortable in your ears. And then it's also compressing the air in your lungs, but your lungs are like balloons. They don't really care. They'll go as small as
Okay.
they want. So what you then do is you pull air, you move air by whatever technique you happen to be using from your lungs into your head. So you push air into your head, out to your ears. So basically you have a box and it's getting smaller, and then you have a balloon connected to it, and you just squeeze the balloon a bit or pull air from the balloon, and it kind of makes the box the same size again, if that makes
Is
sense. So
is
you're trying
that
to,
something you do consciously?
yes, yeah, yeah. When you're on a
Interesting.
plane and you have to yawn or like move your jaw around, you're equalizing. It happens to be in the opposite direction, but yeah. So I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, like, and he ended up the good thing about freediving is you can't end up in a position which you're like not ready for, because to go further
Yeah.
down you have to be relaxed. If you're not relaxed, you'll tense up, and then all these pipes and stuff are closed and you can't equalize. They have to be open, so you have to be soft and relaxed to actually be able to do it, to actually be able to go down,
Mm.
which is quite an interesting kind of feature. When people tell me I'm really scared, like, what happens if I go down to 10 meters and I freak out and like drown? And I'm like, well, you won't have got down to 10 meters in the first place. You'll stop yourself at 2.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful journey of, because we have all these limiting factors and fears and beliefs,
Mm.
they help you and they protect you from putting yourself in a position you can't handle. And then the journey is overcoming them. And then only when you've overcome them can you move on to the next level. You can't skip steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like those fears, that fear you're talking about, because I remember like feeling that, it's that initial fear that like, and it's like
But
once you
that's
start
everything.
something, you start feeling
Yeah,
great and you start
exactly.
feeling more confident, and you just have to get the toes in the water, and then you
Yep.
just have to stuff it up a little bit, go to 3 meters and be like, what am I doing? Then, and slowly but surely you're sitting on the bed, and then you move to the next step, and, like,
Exactly right.
yeah,
And,
it's a beautiful, it really is a beautiful process, actually. It's quite enjoyable.
yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
as you were about to say, Martin, like, it's like anything, and I say this all the time as well. Like, anything is the same. Everything's just a metaphor for life. You know, you're just evolving and leveling up and discovering yourself and how you work and how your mind operates and how you can go to these next levels. Wake up tomorrow, blah blah blah. You can get that same journey in yoga or running or business or
Mm,
whatever. It just so happens that because you're playing around with that urge to breathe, which is the strongest urge, I mean, I've ever come across, more than the urge to procreate or make money or whatever, right? The urge to breathe is about as strong as it gets.
mm,
And then also you're playing with deep water, and then deep water has this, it's a blank slate, and the monsters of your subconscious inhabit it very quickly. So
yeah.
you're coming up against these very strong forces. So that same journey, that same metaphor for life of self-discovery and going through these limiting factors and beliefs happens to be just so efficient and so linear, and you can see it very
Mm,
clearly. Unlike running, where you run a bit further this day and that, and like, your leg hurts or something. It's like, no, your ears are the most sensitive part of your body. They're going to hurt straight away
yeah, I
and
love
tell
it.
you what's up. And then, like,
Yeah, I love it.
you have this line 0 to 100 meters, call it. And it's like, how deeply am I able to meditate, to be in the present moment, to relax? Because the deeper you can free dive, like it's almost testing out that meditation skill.
Yeah, I love how you describe it as the urge to breathe. Like it's so obvious, but it's so true. Like navigating the urge to breathe, understanding it, becoming familiar with it, testing its bounds. It's just, I think it's great. I think it's
Air
great for your
hunger,
own,
if you
huh?
will.
Air
Air
hunger.
hunger.
Yeah, look. Air hunger. Got too much air. You got to limit yourself a little bit, mate.
I
It's a
like
good,
that.
no,
I
it's a
like
really
that
good
for
term.
everything.
Huh?
Mm.
No, I was just saying that I love that. I love like restricting myself from easy stuff or stuff that I take for granted, because it makes you value actually that things that you don't when you don't restrict yourself,
Couldn't agree
Exactly.
more.
or either restrict yourself or put yourself in the situation that's worse. For example, warmth. Like we've talked about we've talked about cold water a lot, but it's not like you're restricting yourself from something. It's like you're putting yourself in something. Uh, so you value what you have when you're not in the cold water, and I think it's kind of the same here.
For
And I
sure.
don't know, I love it. I just unlocked something I want to try next.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, man. Like, it's quite funny. The place I am is quite different to where most people are free diving. Most people are free diving, the ocean, so it tends to be blue, and usually it's in a tropical place where there's fish to see or dolphins or whatever. I mean, you tend to not see them when you're actually doing the diving because you want some depth, and the coral reefs and the animals aren't where it's deep. But you go back from the boat, and you can use your skills that afternoon. Here it's a lake, so it's jade green. It's in the mountains, and it's yeah. There's very little life, but not just mountains. There's like 3 volcanoes, one of them being quite
Stop,
active.
man.
Uh,
Stop telling me about it. I don't want to hear.
You're living the life.
but
Bro, I want to go so
but
bad and free dive. Oh.
it's quite funny though, because like, yeah, unlike seeing all the dolphins and the fish, which is great, but again, like that's an external exploration. Like you're, it's almost. I mean, scuba diving, you get more time with them. Than free diving, it's probably a more real connection because it's like there's nothing in between us. We're both just mammals diving about. Dolphins are free diving as well. Um, but like being here, you're going down into this like dark, almost dead
Mm,
space, mythical. The Mayan culture here is alive. The women all wear their traditional woven clothing and speak their Mayan languages, which are nothing like anything European.
yeah.
Um, and the gods and the myths of the winds and the volcanoes and stuff. And so you go down into this like mythical dead world, underworld, and you're holding your breath and you're facing these fears and blah blah. And then you come up and it's like a sunny day and there's like volcanoes and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's quite a dichotomy
Mm,
of how I
Could
came to mind when you're feeling like when you take something away, you suddenly appreciate it when you take that like the light of life down in that dark underworld, and then you come up and it's like the most beautiful place ever. It's
mm.
it's very
It,
obvious.
it sounds like you're really operating an internally life changing experience for a lot of people, I imagine. Like, they
Yeah,
might come with the same mindset of how deep or this is cool, whatever, and then they start navigating fears and things that they've never had the courage to do, and they're
yeah,
in this environment where it's so picturesque, but also so primed as you're talking to understand yourself, and then also even a new culture, like understand a different aspect of life, or understanding new people. Like it sounds like a really holistic program that you're running at the
for
moment.
sure. I mean, freediving is inherently a holistic practice. It was actually I saw it. There's a video online, definitely worth a watch, called One Breath Around the World. I might have forced you to watch it, Zap, when we were together in Paris
Mm.
or something. But it's like 12 minutes on YouTube, um, done by a French world champion. And I watched that. I was like, whoa, people can do that. That was my first ever glimpse of freediving. It went on the list of things to, do and maybe even get into once in your life. And it seems like that, a holistic practice, as you say, like people speak very similarly about rock climbing or jujitsu or something. It kind of takes in your whole life of, yes, your mind, but your body and your spirit, and it's a whole practice of self-discovery. That's certainly how it feels for me. I feel pretty honored. Like, every day is very different because the diving is the exact same. I'm seeing the exact same stuff, but the person's completely different. The person on the buoy, there might be, a young buck who's like, dealing with ego, or there might be like a timid young girl who's like very scared. So my role in those two scenarios are like completely different. But both, find out a lot about themselves in those conditions. And, I've had a few hours, these half days with a lot of people, and it's always surprised me how far we can go in 4 or 5 hours. But then, you have these 2.5-day courses, which is bloody epic because you get a few days. And then later this year, come November, me and a few mates are hooking up some retreats, which will be really exciting. Have best part of the week with these people and incorporate a few other practices that are kind of in tune with it all. Pretty keen to see how they go.
Yeah. Martin, are we booking a trip or what? Come on, mate.
Man, please. Let's maybe not Guatemala, but let's do this, please. I actually want to do it.
Freediving's sick, man.
I don't know Guatemala though. I do want to go somewhere in the future. But I have a question. What would you say is like the hardest part of it? Like the toughest? Like, do you want to quit? Do you want to breathe so bad that you think about quitting early on, or are you able to just
Yeah,
hold on your breath?
it's not like, it's very different because most things that we do, like, you go running or you go to the gym. I'll take the gym for instance. It's like, it's always like push harder and like push yourself more. And you especially on like a leg day, right? You do, and you have a lot more in the tank, but just like you don't want to, because you don't want to come against that beast of like the pain. And this is kind of, I mean, it feels similar to maybe those last squats that you can do, but they'll like just involve a lot of suffering. If you want to hold your breath for a long time, you just have to sit in that urge to breathe. Carbon dioxide is just bullying you, and you just have to. But instead of like grunting and fighting and tensing up against it, it's like you have to relax and like sink into it, which becomes very different. So you can't like hold on to yourself and be like, and grab your ego essentially, and be like, oh no man, I'm gonna lift this weight. It's the opposite of like, I know one, and like I'm almost detached from my body and I don't even feel this.
Yeah.
Then in the water, yeah, like going down on a deep dive, it's the same game. It's just the next level because not only are you holding your breath, but you're going down into the depth, which if you were to not be relaxed would crush you. And then if you want to breathe all of a sudden while you're 40 meters below the water, so it's going to be a while even if you sprint up. That takes a certain depth of relaxation and surrender that I personally never found anywhere else. Like I distinctly remember getting to that because it was a big change. At least for me, I was stuck in like the mid 30 meters. It's kind of a barrier physiologically. Your lungs are kind of now going smaller than they actually can physically go above water when you go below 30 meters. So everything's significantly more tense or like more compressed than ever before. Yeah. And to go deeper than that, at least for me, that was a moment where I finally did it, where I'd surrendered and kind of given up control and comfort and familiarity more in that dive more than I had it ever in anything else. And it was interesting because actually after that, like just that one moment, we're talking a minute and a half of my life. After that, I could suddenly like do things that I couldn't really do before. Like I could suddenly like handstand, and like hitchhiking became a super easy thing to like control my emotions. And I could, Zav and I were going around, and before Zav even, it's like for hours, just like, keeping a smile up and dance and stuff and never like letting it bear on you. It's a weird thing to try to describe if it hasn't been experienced, but this having been there once, you know what it is and you can seek it out easier, that level of surrender to not just the forces of the water and the urge to breathe, but then you can transfer that onto the forces of nature and life and existence,
It's such a beautiful lesson. And I think it's something I'm learning still. I think it's something you can always grow in, how to,
For sure.
that level of just like surrender and acceptance. It's quite beautiful. Um, I think like my old mindset, I'm so glad that I think more like this now as opposed to my old mindset, which was control, become better, and if you control the things around you and you're in that high stress environment, then you'll probably succeed and win. And now it just changed. It's like
Yeah.
if I actually surrender and relax in my scenario, in that relaxed state, I can probably produce actually my most effective results in all
Yeah,
things. Like
definitely.
in an exam, instead of being stressed and studying so hard all the time, I give myself the time to just relax and actually like almost get into this flow state. And
Mm.
that it just produces amazing results. Like even at work, and it's funny that we're talking about this when I feel like this is actually counterculture, even though I think it should be mainstream. I think what mainstream is the stress, the overthinking of life, the struggle to surrender to the challenges and wanting to control everything, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's Sigma grind set, mate.
Sigma,
Sigma grind set, you know. You know what I mean?
yeah, I don't know.
Well, the thing
I
with
don't know.
that is like if you grind through life, you're limited by your own
Mm,
imagination. Like, you can have a dream and you can grind your way and like basically grind yourself to dust in achieving it and manifesting that. And it'll probably work, but what are you? What's left of you that did the initial dream when you get that dream? And B, like you're limited by your imagination whenever you first did that. Along the road to that, things will come into play. And if you're closed because you're narrow onto one thing, you won't be able to flow freely, not just with yourself, but the whole world, with the people of the world. Like,
yeah.
you
Mm,
obviously you need some discipline and you need to be heading in a direction, but also the openness to when something else comes along, if it is actually flowing and going to move you forward, it might be on a slight different path, but you can build this bountiful tree rather than just like one bamboo stalk straight up. Like,
yeah.
I think that's something that we've come to the conclusion with also Xavier and Santi that is not here today. We've talked about a lot about motivation and grinding and doing hard things and goals and purpose and we always came to the conclusion that you need to be super motivated and grind your way towards your goal. But if your motivations change, then or your goals change or whatever, you have to be open enough to notice that and be ready to switch, because otherwise you'll probably end up somewhere that you didn't want to land.
Mm,
Um,
it's a
but
tool,
yeah,
right? It's the
I
fuel.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people don't have that in mind, and they just grind towards something, and then when they end up there, they realize, oh, at this point I shouldn't have kept going because I have this shift in my emotions or whatever.
Yeah.
mm.
Um,
Well, I
so
think
yeah,
a
I
lot of
think that
people. So I was going to say, I think a lot of people don't also surrender themselves to the point of noticing, like actually having the realization that you're changing. Some people can, or they might feel the slightest and then just completely go against it because that's not the norm. It's not what they know. It's not where they're comfortable. But being comfortable, or even not just being comfortable, embracing uncertainty can take you to places where you've never been before, and it's beautiful, really.
Just, I
Sorry
just
to
had a
interrupt.
thought. I just had a thought that the discipline, like I always see that as like a tool. It's a fuel to get you to somewhere. I'm just thinking if you're a super disciplined person, like a soldier, for instance, it's kind of like the monkey at its peak form. It's like the animal side of you has been taken and it, like absolutely like made efficient and stuff. But if you do that at the expense of the human, the divinely touched human, the God within, um, you're just a monkey. You're just a soldier. Maybe it's because like your parents or your society told you to do this, so you've optimized yourself through discipline to get to the end, right? But you've never
Mm,
actually taken on your own life. and your own, like, special fucking meaning. So that if you just play around, like, I'm in a place with a lot of hippies. So if you play around with just like, I'm a divine being, right? And you have no discipline, you don't do anything either, right? You need to have a bit of monkey, a bit of discipline, a bit of like action in the world. But I think at least our Western cultures have certainly like prioritized that optimization, perhaps, of the
Yeah.
animal. I see that a lot with like disconnection with nature. It's like, oh, I'm going to nature. I'm into nature. I don't like nature. It's like, bro, you are nature. Like, there is no boundary. The gases in between you and the forest, like, all this stuff, like, it doesn't even make sense. And that's a bit of a tangent, but certainly, like, fooling yourself into thinking you have control and you can control your own circumstance is kind of a fool's paradise, and you're really just a monkey playing in its own cage.
Mm.
I love your analogy about the monkey and the god. First, I'd like to ask you, why do you say a god or a divine touched human? Where does that come
Um,
from? I understand the monkey part.
yeah, I think it's like human beings seem to have a special awareness, a special like realm of consciousness. If you go, everything is conscious, everything's part of like this universal. I mean, I'm pulling in my whole world view of existence here, like metaphysical stuff. But I believe there's a universal consciousness, right? And everything has varying degrees of that. A rock is conscious to some degree. It's having its own existence. It's part of it all. We are part of it. It is part of us. We are everything and nothing. Um, and therefore, there's different levels to consciousness. At least, we have a quite short life, but we're very aware of what's going on. At least we think we are, right? So within our limiting frame of awareness, we are, fairly obviously some form of God. Like, if we limit our view of the world as Earth and like civilization, compared to a dog or a fish or anything, we're changing things and we're having a bigger effect um, than anything else. Now, obviously, you can argue that frame of reference might not be the most important and certainly not the only one. But that's a whole nother discussion, right? In our frame of reference, we're the gods. Like,
Mm.
I like that analogy because and also how you mentioned the consciousness being a part of all of this, because Freud has a model for the mind, and he separates the mind in mainly three parts. The first one is the ID, and the ID of the mind is basically what you call the monkey. It's that we have until we're like 6 years old, and most animals have. It's what basically take us back to our animal roots. Um, so, for example, when you're running and you want to give up, that's your ID calling you because you're tired, you're gonna injure yourself or whatever. When you are just hungry and you stop getting mad, and that's your ID. A Freud would say that's your ID calling you and saying, "Hey, you're hungry, eat something." Or when you're holding your breath in freediving, that's like your ID telling you, "Give up, you need to breathe." But then you have also the super ego, and that's what that's how Freud called what you call the God, or the divine touched human. And it's like what society expects from us, what our parents expect from us, and what we
Mm.
think we actually care about that. And finally, we have like the ego, and the ego is like this mediator between the ID and the superego, and it's basically us negotiating between these two things, between what our parents expect from us, what our animal instincts expect from us, what our societies, teachers, friends, brothers, siblings, everything. Um, so I don't know. It just when you mentioned the monkey like talking to fighting with the god or whatever how you described it, for me it sounded super familiar to this like Freud model of the mind and the consciousness and how it works inside of you. And it was, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
so true when you start like making yourself conscious of this, you start realizing like this internal dialogue between these parts of you.
I got some drilling in the background. That's
That's
brilliant,
really
man.
nice.
Like, and I like the fact that there's that third guy, the ego in between, because I think, I mean, I'll only speak for myself, but I think everyone like feels that you're kind of tugged between these two parts of you. There's all every decision we make. It's like, okay, do I have a beer? It's like, I fucking love a beer. Like, connect with people, have friends. But then there's the other side of you. It's like, should I be like, is that optimizing my health? And all this shit. Like, and you're always stuck between these
Right.
two. And the one you probably identify best with is that ego, that guy stuck in the middle. And I think it's always nice to flick between two and maybe even take the two to extremes, especially when you're young and trying to figure it all out. You see that a lot. People will go on these binge fests and really associate with the animal inside them. And then also they'll go on like a 10-day silent retreat. And I see that more in the West, the Westerners trying to figure themselves out. So yeah, you go on huge parties and raves and binges and festivals, and that's all animalistic.
Yeah.
And then you're also the same person will go on like a juice cleanse and a 10-day silent retreat. And it's quite funny to compare that kind
Juice
of way of
cleanse.
figuring one out with, like, for instance, here in Guatemala and maybe not in Santiago, I'm sure in different parts of Chile, like further north, like it kind of more simple in terms of civilization wise, human is often not going to those extremes. And I often find myself like wondering why. Like the answer I usually come to is just community, and it's kind of more ingrained of like this is what you're doing. There's less individuality. Certainly as individuals in the West, you're on this like mission to figure yourself out, and that often means going to extremes, both sides, the monkey and God, and then your ego's stuck in between, being like, what the fuck's happening to me?
Yeah, I would argue that most of the problem that most people have, including me, I think everyone, when they have like this, when they don't know what to do with their life, or they just like are wiggling between options, or they don't know what career path follow or whatever, is that and Freud talks about this, is that most of the super ego, most of this divine part of us, is super unconscious, and it's said when we were children by our parents, teachers, and society mostly. So when we actually get to the adult part and the ego starts negotiating between the ID and the superego, you start realizing that most of the ideas of the superego don't apply to you anymore, but they are so deep, they're rooted so deep inside of you and so unconsciously that it's hard for you to get those ideas out of your head. And I
Fair,
think that's when doing things like free diving help you a lot,
for
because it
sure.
just helps you dive inside of your mind so deeply that you're able to like find the roots of all this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think the freediving gives you a very efficient way to glimpse it in a very healthy, like physically healthy manner. I think realistically, and also, yeah, you just become more familiar with practice. Like you become more familiar looking at those states. Now, I mean, this is a lifetime of work. It's never ending. So you need time, to analyze that super ego and see what you actually want it to do and want it to be, or what it is, and like how, if that's good or bad. And that can't be done
Yeah, but
obviously in
I
a
guess
minute.
I guess my point was that when you have all these things in the back of your mind, let's say in the super ego telling you, oh, you have to be this, you need to do this, you have to fit in society or whatever, you don't know, that's all you know and that's all you care about. But when you start doing things like free diving, where you need to hold your breath longer than you thought you could, when you start doing like cold baths and you put yourself in cold water longer than you would have, when you do hitchhiking and you realize, oh, you don't need a car, you can just hop on to someone else. When you realize all
Yeah,
this stuff that you had already like said, okay, this is how the world is, and you realize, oh no, this is not how the world is. This is not how I am. That's what makes you that's what makes you able to actually look what you want to do in life, and pursue your
for
purpose.
sure. For sure. And I think there's an important part there. All those things you mentioned, the hitchhiking, the ice baths, the free diving, are you're actively going out of your way and taking steps through, for instance, discipline and taking on these fears. Like like actively in your own body, usually, you know, sober. So when you're like having those thoughts and cutting down those walls and pushing through those barriers, like you're kind of ready for them because you put yourself there. You see it a lot, you know, because psychedelics, for instance, will do the same thing for you, but it's pretty fucking intense, and you didn't really have to do anything to experience that like shattering of limits. So you see
Do you have
people
any
that like,
strong experiences in that?
for sure. I mean, the same festival that I met the guy who taught me freediving was the first time I took psychedelics, so maybe there's some correlation there. But
Didn't you go?
you know,
Wait,
you're
sorry. Let's clarify this. Let's clarify this.
yeah, go on.
Didn't you become vegan or vegetarian
Yes,
after
yeah,
taking
I
psychedelics?
became vegan in that as well. It was that was like a 3 days, very distinct like chapter, you know, end and beginning. You know, that's like a
Yeah,
part
right.
one entering part two stage of life for sure. That weekend.
So,
Um,
no, if you want to become vegan, take psychedelics.
yeah, wow. Well, this is the thing though. Like, you know, as you're saying, Martin, like all those practices that cut down those barriers and show what it all is and who you actually are. Like, there's a lot of ways to get there. I think long term, you know, you can use aids for sure. I really like the fact that, for instance, psychedelics are becoming more mainstream and accessible and even used medicinally. But long term, I would say it's better to be doing a practice like freediving, ice bath, blah, 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 take a pick, which shows you that and breaks down those limits. And you can actively wake up and, like, you know, pursue that experience rather than always just
Yeah.
like having it done onto you, and then you don't really have a position of strength in that whole process. You just kind of melt. You know, people who take acid, like their brains eventually just melt. Like, you know, their identity, their themselves, their very sense of being, which probably isn't the goal. You know, where you have a monk who like might also be melted, but he has full control over the liquid.
Mm.
I'm super interested in this psychedelics things. What made you become a vegan? What's the relation there? How
Yeah,
how did that happen?
yeah, like so. I've had, I would say, a fairly similar experience to Xavier, like growing up, pretty like, you know, good family, good school, just pretty like normal, you know, upper middle class, could you describe it as, maybe? Yeah. And psychedelics are not on the menu, right? That kind of thing is not like, you know, what you're just surrounded by. And then there was like, Zav knows, there was like a girl involved. So I was kind of like on a bit of a, not vulnerable is not the right word, but, you know, searching for things after that. And then,
Mm.
and then I was up in a different part of Australia. So I was very distant from university and parents and those things that had built up the superego. I was not living at home. I was living in a different environment. So that gave me more freedom to like kind of check around, see what's going on, not under that kind of shadow of those sources of the super ego as you described. And then,
Mm.
yeah, I ended up hanging around with some people that were like full hippie conspiracy theorists. I mean, this is mid-COVID, like, you know, full send in that direction. And I'm like, you
Yeah.
know, a skeptic, but always open-minded. And went up to this festival with them just to let off some steam and to see what it's all about. And yeah, in that context of, I mean, vegan was this, you know, that's a given in this community, right? And then, you know, you go from there all the way to like, I mean, yeah, right. So yeah, when I was under the influence of these drugs, and I would say these drugs do exactly what you just said. They break down for a few hours. They break down those walls, and then you can rebuild
Yeah.
them yourself, right? Um, Based on your experience. So all the walls are shattered and broken down. You have a clean slate. And then because of the influence that I was kind of getting, I was thinking about veganism. And I was kind of, and you have no limiting factors to the train of thought. Often if I'm thinking
Mm.
I should do something, I need to do something in life or whatever, you know, you think about it, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. How is that going to be done? And then you kind of, the thought takes its toll. And after a few minutes or hours or whatever, you stop and you kind of hold it for another day. So it might come might take 6
Yeah.
months or years or half a lifetime to rise on a decision that could technically be made very quickly. It's just you distract yourself and you kick the can down the road. And my
Yeah.
experience with that first dose of mushrooms, was there was none of that need to kick it down the road. I was just full steam ahead, thinking out a thought. Not unnaturally. I wasn't, seeing things or anything. I just had no limits on my capacity to think. Um, so I fully went down the road, and I realized that at least at that stage of life, like veganism was basically my only option. I couldn't think of a way out of it, and I wasn't, because I had those no limiting factors. I wasn't able to be like, oh, I'll put that on the back burner. There was no back burner. I was, just on the main stove, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how it happened. If that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. Super interesting.
Yeah.
And what did you take that time? Was it the only time?
That was mushrooms the first time. I was up a river by myself for the vegan trip, and then that same festival, I think I took LSD the next
Literally
day.
the vegan trip. Anyways.
Yeah, and yeah, right. LSD the next day, and that was it. I think, and I've taken mushrooms a few times since. I haven't taken LSD since. Um, yeah, it's not like when I was 18, I was in the middle of the Amazon, like really deep into it, and that's like the home of ayahuasca. And this is not like tourism, pay $10,000 for a fucking fancy retreat. This is like 13-year-old boy is having a heart attack, so give him ayahuasca and he's healed. Like it's a medicine, jungle medicine, and so I obviously had the opportunity there, but I just kind of knew I wasn't ready because it seemed like some real shit. And yeah, so it's certainly not
So you
something
haven't
to play
taken
around with.
ayahuasca?
I haven't taken that, no. Certainly, I would say this again, as I say, like those things will burst open barriers of your realm of consciousness and understanding, and it's like taking steroids, right? Like you can take all the steroids in your life, but they're not going to work unless you go to the gym, and they'll probably destroy you and kill you if you don't go to the gym. You can also go to the gym and be a natty your whole life, and that's also respectable. Probably like if you just want to really get super jacked, a bit of both, hitting the gym hard,
Yeah.
also taking steroids. That's kind of how I see free diving, cold bars, all that stuff, and then
Yeah.
psychedelics. Like,
Yeah. Right.
That's a good
So,
analogy. I've never heard that before.
yeah, just made
so
it
would
up
you
there.
say it's almost like the speed of acquisition? Would you say that, through the drugs or through the whatever that is, right? It just happens quicker as
It's just
opposed to the
happening
3-year
quicker.
journey to finally
It's
realizing, wow, it's time to
exactly
actually take
right.
care of the planet and become a vegetarian,
Yeah, because the 3-year journey will include meeting different people and having different conversations and seeing chickens slaughtered and all this stuff, and it'll weigh on your conscious, and eventually that like weight will outweigh itself, and it's probably going to last longer. I'm not vegan anymore. Like that was 9 months, but it wasn't forever of strict
Mm.
veganism. So if you do it
Do you
like the
still have
long
some kind
way,
of dietary restriction?
not really. I have no restrictions on anything I input really. I'm just I tend towards I guess a quote unquote healthier thing. Like
Yeah.
I don't say I don't drink, but I end up usually maybe drinking one drink every 2 or 3 weeks and having like a big night every few months. Like, and I'm not restricting myself at all. I just don't feel like it. Similar
Right.
with similar relationship with like drugs and meat and whatever. Take your pick. Because yeah, I don't know. I just follow my gut. And
Yeah.
and that sounds very good on me for the alcohol stuff, but there's other parts of my life where it's not, like with sugar, for instance, or social media usage. I'm pretty
Yeah.
like, I try not to judge it, but I'm pretty bad. But again, I
Yeah.
try to limit like the severe restrictions. It seems draconian, right? It seems like that super ego is trying to like bully the fucking, what's it called, the ID, and that's never going to end well. You know, the ID will fight back. So I'm quite aware of that. You know,
And the ID is usually super strong, man.
exactly, because it's animalistic. It's, you know, like it's you embody the ID. You know, the superego might be
Yeah.
deep down in your like soul and your bottom of your brain, but your whole body, the way you move through life, is far more animalistic than anything else. 99.99% of decisions are going to be fueled by its you know, desires. I don't know what the
Yeah.
exact question was on, but yeah, I yeah.
I think
Was
we've
there a
answered it.
question?
I think
Cool.
we've answered it. Let's just say that was a great answer.
Yeah, we leave a lot of unanswered questions here.
Yeah, nah, cool.
We usually just
We're just going
forget
on
and keep
tangents.
talking.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's good. Have you guys, either of you, tried psychedelics? Have you got differing experiences?
Not really.
No, no. Look, I've had opportunities to like try psychedelics, but I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm against it. I just wouldn't say it's for me,
Mm,
and that's probably on like a principle level. Like I don't like. I'm not a fan of steroids either, and I'm not a fan of getting things quickly. I think slow
mm,
processes and you know going down a natural route is what I want, and that's because I don't want. That's, I'm not trying to just go as high as I can. I'm really
yeah.
trying in my life right now to enjoy the journey. Um, and that's I've been in this spot for a while, and trying psychedelics or I don't know, getting a rush of money, or it's just not for me. It's not appealing.
Mm,
I think there's like a guiding principle where if you get somewhere slowly, it's a lot healthier.
yeah.
Um, and
Like
I,
that.
I think that also applies to the psychedelics thing. I know people have had positive experiences for sure, but I'm still very skeptical.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't.
I would say, like, you know, if you're like, take continue with the steroid example, like, analogy. If you're a really skinny kid and like popping a few at the start is going to like get you kind of the strength to be able to pick up the first weight to then take it, you know, to start hitting the gym. That's probably a good tool for
Yeah.
you. But if you're already a big dude, there's no need. And I think likewise with psychedelics, like, you know, if you're already, you know, you've done a whole Christian journey, and I fully understand what you're saying there. The good
Mm.
thing is that you, at least in your specific example, know what they are, and are not kind of I don't think you're playing into or a victim of government psyop, you know, psyop operations to like demonize them, which our parents and
Yeah.
grandparents certainly were, you know. So
Yeah.
past generations and past like different places of the world, you know, don't have that choice made for them because their conditioning, their superego conditioning from society has demonized them and told them it's something that it's not. Um,
Yeah.
Making that conscious decision from your point of view, I think, is fucking very healthy and very commendable.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. It's, I think I like the example you raised with the steroids thing. I think under guided advice, drugs or anything that's gives you the extra boost is actually very healthy. Someone that knows, but I know that I don't know enough, so I
Mm,
wouldn't. Um, and that's maybe my lack of understanding could hinder progress, or that the progress of like becoming more aware. It could, but I would only wait until I had a good advisor, a psychedelic advisor, if there
mm.
was, to be like,
Oh,
hey mate, you need to
the
take
next
this
decade
stuff
there'll be
in this
plenty of
kind of
those.
environment. Huh?
The next decade there'll be plenty of those on the market. Don't worry.
Yeah, mate, my sister's becoming a naturopath. Surely she'll give me some psych soon.
Yeah, for
Like, I don't
sure.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, like for example, one thing that I noticed in your story, and I think is present in a lot, is that psychedelics exacerbate the thoughts of the group that's directly around you, and that
Mm,
like, and you're like, whoa, this is awesome, but really, are you just like opening yourself up to be heavily influenced by a close
mm.
circle, and is that good? You
Yeah.
know, um, that's something I'm also aware of. So let's say I were to take psychedelics, it would be in a place that would probably challenge my current mental state. You know, I probably wouldn't be with you guys because I feel like we can think and do the same. And I don't know, I want to be with people that like challenge me in a healthy way, but
Yeah.
also finding that very difficult. So
What
yeah,
I think, like, because all those like, even the vegan one, I wasn't around. I had been around people, those days, but when I was actually on the thing, like I was up a river on my own. I was in. Again, I said before, like nature is everything, but like I was in nature. I was way in there on my own
yeah,
with nature, and I think those plant medicines, at least, obviously don't have to. There's no rules, but the healthiest way I would say to take them is to connect with nature, and then they'll teach you more than anything. And that was why, because vegan had been on my mind, that's basically what it was. It's like you are part of nature, and in that case, don't eat it. Um, but
yeah,
like that's what it shows you. It connects you and with the fact that you are everything and nothing. You are part of this universal consciousness, and you can, if
mm,
you have different experiences. I've on another one, like a few months ago, like I'm just basically crawled up in bed, almost sleeping. Right, it's almost like a lucid dream, and you're kind of going through. At least I would say, like, to the edges of my perception of the universe. I can't imagine 200 million light years away. My brain can't comprehend that. Right, so my limits of like the universe and what
yeah,
that is, going around that, and like the possibility for aliens and all this stuff, right? Like, at least in my imagination, it doesn't really, I'm not saying I was traveling through this, but it's interesting because then you also see, if you hit the limits of your imagination, but it's quite obvious that there's stuff beyond that you just can't imagine. Bit of a weird
yeah.
one, but do you know the mantis shrimp? It's an animal.
Mantis, what? Sorry, shrimp.
Mantis shrimp. Yeah, it's an animal. It's about 12
Mhm.
inches long. It has the fastest.
Anyway,
It punches its. It punches its.
Oh,
Fucking hell.
yeah. Is that the animal that
yeah,
can see
Martin
many,
gets
many
it.
colors?
Yeah, yeah. It punches. It's like prawn. It's a prawn. It punches its claw like the speed of a bullet, and like boils the water that's like going around it. Right. Also, though, its eyes see in like 37 different light spectrums or something. So obviously we
Mm,
see the world. This is a classic, right? We see the world in the visible light spectrum. Yet we know there's like UVA, UVB, and all the rest,
pretty
X-ray,
sure
infrared.
there's 64 times more. So the amount of spectrum we see, if you consider that
Yeah,
one, there's 64 times more spectrums than we see, which
brilliant.
is
That's
wild.
it. Yeah, that's it. And that's on
Mm,
just that thing of like eyesight, but that almost certainly exists in everything, right? And I think that's kind of the beauty of those plant medicines, where you probably can't get there on your own, and it's a plant at the end of the day, right? So that's
mm.
always interesting, like or deep
Yeah.
meditation. Like, I mean, it's just unlocking
When
parts that
people,
already exist. It's not giving you anything. It's just unlocking parts of your brain, so you can certainly meditate yourself to opening those doors. But just
Yeah.
living a normal life, I think, would be pretty hard.
yeah, when people tell me things like this, mantis that can see whatever many colors more than us, I just cannot imagine that. And when I
Right?
realize I can't imagine how could it be being that animal, I think I know so little. Like, what am I doing? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Such a healthy thought.
And
Such
that's
a
the kind
healthy
of beauty of it. Like,
thought.
you get to explore from a point of humility, like, well, I'm just this little minuscule piece in this great puzzle of whatever the fuck is going on with existence. And like,
Mm,
that's so special. And
mm,
being able to, again, if you take that like intent into a trip, like, I think it's really nice. You know, just like if you want to get smashed because you want to escape your shit life, it's not good. But if you want to like enjoy a few alcoholic beverages to connect with people on a more open level and just cut down a few socially imposed barriers, that seems relatively
mm.
healthy, right? It seems like a worthwhile tool, right? It shouldn't be completely written off. And I think that's a appropriate way to look at psychedelics. Like,
I think this really ties back really well into the program that you're running and the practice that you're doing, because you've kind of just said, you could be in the same scenario doing the exact same thing, but it's all about the underlying intention and perspective that you have in that environment that
mm,
constitutes health.
mm,
That, like, if you weren't, having the I guess optimum perspective, or not optimum, like the perspective of being social and friends in the drinking scenario, and you're having the perspective of I'm trying to escape, but you drank the same amount,
yeah,
one's healthy and one's not.
right.
I'm talking on a mental level, not a physical.
But I think it
Alcohol is
also,
not the
the
best
weird thing is
physical,
it's also
you know.
physical. It's also physical because cortisol things and like, your your mental state is like directly attached to your
Yeah, yeah, no,
physical
no, no.
state as well, right? Like,
Yeah, but
Absolutely. No, I'm talking
is
about the
cortisol
alcohol thing
physical?
sure,
specifically, like the actually consuming,
sure,
because
yeah,
in one pint of beer, I think there's like 7 slices of bread, the equivalent
yeah,
carbs. Like,
yeah,
look, it's probably just not amazing, but no, like, I get
yeah,
it. Like, the thinking, it impacts the chemical. Yeah, yeah, love it. But yeah, that ties so well, or it ties so neatly back to what you're doing and your practice, because it's not about the environment. As you said, you don't have to be in the sea with all the fish, and you're in a lake where it's almost a kind of a blank slate. But it's about the internal, and it's about the perspective that you take in there, understanding the surrender. Like we keep coming back to this idea of what's in within to be healthy outside,
yeah,
and that's
yeah, for
awesome.
sure,
I love it.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah, and I'm really interested. What other practices do you use to complement your freediving? I think I've seen you guys like doing some breathing
Yeah,
on the side or something like
so
that.
like,
Like,
so every course that I run starts with this, like, I call it freediving yoga and breath hold meditation. So I mean, your lungs are like balloons. They'll go as big or as small as they have space to go. And if you stretch the muscles between your rib cage and especially your diaphragm's like ability to move, your lungs have more space to go bigger, so you can actually increase your lung capacity. And
mm,
that's not just by like 2 or 5%. We're talking like 20%. I've seen numbers as big as 50% increased lung capacity, which is fucking
yeah, wow.
wild, right?
So how do you
Um,
measure that? Sorry, is that by like
so that's
how
how
much you
much
can
you
have
can
in
like,
water,
how much you
or
can blow it. Like, it's how many liters of air are in your lungs. Um,
okay, right?
yeah.
Wow,
So
air
yeah,
versus liters, fun. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah. So the average male is 6 liters, which is a fair amount. Um, so yeah,
Cool.
like we start with a bit of yoga, stretching those intercostal muscles, muscles between your ribs, and then it basically drops down into a meditation where you're perfectly still. You're just lying on a yoga mat and try not to move. And you have this. I use the monkey analogy. It's like you have this little monkey that kind of makes you want to scratch your nose or shuffle around a bit, but it's just a little monkey. It's annoying, but you know how to like not give into it, right? You can, if you want, not move and like just deal with a scratch, right? Um, Whereas when we start to hold our breath, then the monkey becomes bigger. Get some muscles, carbon dioxide that's
Yeah.
produced and increases in your system from the monkey eye to cooler steroids, right? The nutrition, the protein shakes, it puts on a bit of muscle and suddenly it's
Mm,
a chimpanzee and then a gorilla. And you get the real urge to breathe and your diaphragm's contracting away and you're basically like vibrating on the floor, holding
mm,
holding your breath, and you're like up against King Kong. And that's a slow guided journey, but everyone from day dot, because you're comfortable, everyone's comfortable in the context of lying down on a yoga mat, right? So you're comfortable to
yeah.
like send it into like facing face with King Kong. Now, when we get in the water, it's the exact same scenario. That's why I like to show them how far you can go, but inevitably in the water, they won't go as far and as deep into it because they're not as comfortable. Um,
Yeah.
Suddenly you got a wetsuit on, you're in somewhat cold water, like it's deep, it's dark, it's scary. And it's only when, for me, I'm a bit more comfortable there, so I can go further
Mm,
into it. My brain will like allow me to send it further. But that's what we kind of start with, and it's really cool. You can
Yeah.
your brain
So I was
forces
going to say,
itself. Go on.
there you go.
Oh, I'm just saying, like, especially with the contractions, because your diaphragm contracts. It's like hiccups, these really strong hiccups, and
Yeah.
to sit in that, your brain, if your brain realizes that you're not going to breathe, it starts to detach from your body. So you get into that, and then you kind of have these out of body experiences just from holding your breath, because that's its coping mechanism, and that's fucking cool. Like, yesterday,
Sick.
doing that for a guy for the first time, he's like, wow, like,
Mate, this is some third eye shit. I love it. I love
yeah,
it. Man, I actually like I've been meditating and then like you focus, it literally like you feel like you're about to have an out of body experience. It's sick.
yeah.
Epic.
Try holding your breath a bit. Just don't do it in the water.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess look, there's one more thing that like when you were speaking, like it resonates so much to me, the concept of the conscious and non-conscious mind, and
Sure.
like how you can actually influence your subconscious, non-conscious, whatever it is, through conscious activity. And it sounds a lot like what you're doing. And I was talking to someone the other day, we were talking about non-conscious inhibitory controls. So like
Okay.
when you've got your subconscious mind and it says no, it's not a yes. Like your conscious often says yes and your non-conscious often says no, right?
Okay.
And we were
Well,
talking about
could
this
you give an example of that?
yeah. We were talking about this in the context of people that have obesity issues, right? And it's not their, a lot of their big issue isn't the fact that they're struggling to stop saying yes, but it's their non-conscious mind that systematically doesn't say no to the
Yeah,
food
for sure.
as a regular human, right?
Yeah.
So if in regular people, the inhibitory control is much stronger. It's much like no cookie,
Yeah.
like
Right.
no, I don't need this. This isn't necessary. But for them, it's like, it's just, they're just there and they have to, it's a much stronger conscious process, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I like what you're talking about is because it's like when you're going underwater, you're consciously saying yes to not breathing, and then your brain is non-conscious. This is in my mind. I might be wrong. Saying
Yeah.
no to your no, and it
Yeah.
screams at you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that is breathing. Is breathing. I love breathing. The reason why is because it's so fundamental to both sides of your brain. You can
Yeah.
consciously breathe, and you can also subconsciously breathe. Sick, epic. And like through meditation, you can really understand the relationship between two of the both minds. And I
That's a
think
really good
not
way of putting it. Wow. Yeah. Go
yeah,
on.
and not only understanding that relationship, you can also start learning how to influence both sides of the brain, because your non-conscious it does influence so many things you do. As Martin was saying before, as a kid, there's a lot of ideas that are implanted in that kind of part of your brain, and then throughout your later life, that influences you so much in the ego or in the dreams and all that. But learning how to influence that through meditative practice, and what you're doing is ultimately, I think, a meditative practice, is awesome. And it's really freeing, and you become much more, I guess, familiar with who you are as a person and objective to yourself. Yeah. So
No, it's
I
exactly
love
like.
how that you're like developing that,
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna steal what you just said about the breath, though, about the fact that you can do it consciously and unconsciously, and that's why it's so powerful. I mean, I always say it's because there's nothing you want more, and that's also true. But
yeah.
the fact you can't eat, like you can kind of, but you can't eat unconsciously. You still have to pick up. I mean, I guess you can, but like, it's a lot.
It's
Breathing
look, you
unconsciously is a
can,
whole
but
kettle of fish. It's like
breathing is one
proper
that's easily,
unconscious.
like, it's like within one meditation, right?
Yeah.
You can be sitting there meditating and you're totally focusing on your breath.
Yeah.
3 minutes later, you're totally not focused on it, still breathing, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah, where
like,
the line's very clear. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
for
And I'm,
sure.
I'm trying to learn this practice, right? This is crazy. And it's
Mm,
so hard for me to do. And I think it's going to take so much time. But I remember in head, like I use Headspace, right? And I'm there meditating, and then she goes, oh, now it's time to focus on the breath, or like, let's switch our attention to the breath or something like that. But she says it's when you're switching your attention, it's not about controlling. But so often, as soon as I switch my attention to something, I want to control it. And I notice, and now I've like fine-tuned it to just notice that I'm now controlling my breath, and it's changed its rhythm to what it was. It
yeah,
did. Before it was a very relaxed, very natural rhythm. Now it's like, how heavy am I breathing? How did it? Like you start to think about it, and when you think about it, you start to control it. But slowly gaining this ability to think about it, be conscious of it, but not control it.
to
Just
observe.
just to observe, and that
Right, yeah.
is like it really does. This level of surrender really does help you in so many areas of life to like
Yeah,
learn how to be in a relaxed flow whilst having attention to something awesome,
that's
like let's say
wow.
you're
That's
in
really
this
good.
argument with your friend or family, and you just notice your emotions, and you don't have to control them, and you don't have to control the other person's emotions that you realize are coming at you. You observe, you're aware, and you're balanced, you know
Yeah,
and I think it leads to a lot of healthy outcomes.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
The only thing similar to that I do here is kind of at the end of all this breath holding and detachment and like, out of your body and all this stuff. Like after all of it, and you come against King Kong, I say, okay, like we've done all this stuff, but you
Mm.
probably haven't taken a moment to appreciate where you are. And I kind of talk them, it's all oratory, or at least I try to make it. But essentially, they're living a
Yeah.
life of like a rock. You know, they can't see, they can't hear, they can't touch, can't taste, can't move, can't react, can't interact with the world. They're just observing it through their ears. That's it, right?
Mm.
And like they're only there for a few minutes, but I like to put the idea in their head, like, what about a lifetime like this, like 80 years, just lying there, perfectly still,
Mm.
not moving, not looking, and you hear the sounds of the world go by, and like how quickly would you forget your own name, or what a bird looks
Yeah.
like, what a money or a country is like, if all you're doing, the only input is sounds, like within 6 months, do you reckon, or would it take even that long? You probably go, you lose your mind quite literally. It's a completely different. This is tying it back to what I said earlier on. Like it's a completely different level of consciousness, that of a rock.
Mm.
And you can, in half an hour right now, you should lie down and don't move, don't open your eyes. You can kind of tap into that, or at least get a somewhat of an idea of what that could possibly be like. Imagine a million years of like as a rock would. Um,
It's awesome.
that's similar to what you're saying. I really like that you attach it
Mm.
to the breath, because it's a lot harder to do. By the
Yeah.
sound of
Yeah.
it.
Nah, sick, man. Oh, I could talk about meditation for ages.
Mm.
I love this. That's something I still have pending, like get more into meditation. I do have some things to say about it, but I think we can talk about it in another day. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. Thank you so much for coming,
Nice.
Tim. I've learned a lot
Thank
today.
you.
I
Thanks,
actually
Tim.
have.
It's been good.
Uh, I
Awesome.
just got something else I want to try next. Free diving. Sounds cool. So yeah, thank you, man.
No, also I'm so glad it struck a chord with you. Because yeah, it's the only like accessible extreme sport. You can do it from day dot. And one last thing I will say about it, to say to most people, is that unlike teaching tennis or golf, where it's like this is a game we invented a few hundred years ago, whatever. This is how you manipulate your wrist and hit the ball and stuff. Going back a bit, but we're mammals, right? And cats and dogs are also mammals, and sheep and cows, but so are dolphins and whales and seals. And we were them 95 million
Seals,
years ago,
actually?
but seals as well, yeah, yeah. So
I didn't know.
the seals are like dogs, Um,
Right.
And they're free diving, right? So 95 million years ago, we had a common ancestor with dolphins. And the way evolution works is that you don't lose things, like you just forget them. They get deeply buried in your like DNA, in your genetic potential. And what we're doing when we free dive is kind of unlocking again this inner dolphin, this inner mermaid, this ability to free
Right.
dive. It's a lot closer to you get hit by a bus all of a sudden, you can't walk. For the next year or two, you're like remembering how to walk, right? You're in rehab, and like, this is how my neural connections associate with my leg, and this is how it's done, and blah, blah, blah. But you know how to walk. Your body and mind know how to walk. It's the most natural thing you could ever do, but you've had to relearn that. That's what freediving is. We forgot it
Yeah.
many moons ago, but that's what it's doing. I think
So,
that
in summation, we're expanding from the god and the monkey to the god and the monkey and the prehistoric animal that swam.
exactly
That's
to the
the new.
turning
I'm
yourself into a
looking my
superhero.
inside dolphin.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta, bro. I'm telling you, people don't realize there's the god of the, but man, there's the
the dolphin.
fucking inner dolphin,
There's a dolphin
that's
inside of you.
constantly there.
Yeah, bro. It's good. It's good stuff. Now get involved. Put it on the list.
Love it, love it.
Awesome,
Sweet.
lads.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Bro Science podcast. We've discovered many things about meditation, freediving, and exploring the nature around you and surrendering to yourself. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim. Thanks again, Martin, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Gotcha.